The planet was desolate, covered in endless stretches of broken earth, jagged rocks, and dark skies. The air was dry and the ground was cracked, showing signs of a world once full of life but now abandoned by time. Among the wreckage of a damaged alien ship lay a figure, barely conscious, her chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. She was an alien princess, once a mighty leader of a powerful species, but now she was nothing more than a survivor. Her name was Lyra, and she had been left to die. It had all happened so quickly. The enemy had attacked without warning, tearing through her ship and sending it crashing to the planet's surface. Lyra had been severely injured during the battle, her wounds deep and her strength fading. The ones who had once served her loyal soldiers, had abandoned her without hesitation. She had no way of knowing why they had left her behind, but it was clear they didn't think she was worth saving. They had made their choice, and now Lyra was alone. The darkness of the planet seemed to swallow her as she lay motionless, struggling to keep her eyes open. Her breathing was slow, her body aching, but her mind was still sharp. She thought back to her life before the crash, her mission, the promises of peace, the people she had left behind. She had been so sure of herself then. Now, all of it seemed like a distant dream. She couldn't remember how long she had been lying there. Hours, days? It didn't matter. The only thing that mattered now was surviving. Her fingers twitched, reaching out weakly as if grasping for something, anything that could help. But the ground was barren, and there was nothing nearby to offer her any relief. The only sound she could hear was the wind howling across the broken landscape, carrying with it the scent of dust and decay. With great effort, she turned her head slightly to the side, her vision blurred. Her ship, once a magnificent vessel that symbolized the power of her people, was now just a twisted mass of metal and wires. Her heart sank as she realized that there was no one coming to save her. A distant part of her brain still clung to hope. Perhaps someone would find her, maybe a search party would arrive, but that hope seemed to fade with each passing moment. She had heard no sign of life for so long, and the pain in her chest was growing worse. Her wounds were not healing, and she knew it would only be a matter of time before her body gave out. As she struggled to stay conscious, her thoughts drifted back to her people, to the ones she had fought so hard to protect. What would they think of her now? Would they remember her? Would they even know she was gone? The questions filled her mind, but there were no answers. It was then that she heard a sound. At first, she thought it was just a trick of her fading mind, but then the sound grew louder, a soft crunching of footsteps across the rocky ground. Her heart skipped a beat. Was it another enemy coming to finish what they had started? Or perhaps a search party, one that had been sent to find her? She tried to move, to push herself up from the ground, but her strength was gone. She could barely lift her arm, let alone stand. Her body was weak, and her injuries were too much for her to handle alone. The footsteps grew closer, and then she felt a shadow fall over her. A figure appeared before her, its shape tall and imposing. She tried to focus her blurry vision, but everything was a haze. She couldn't make out any details. Only the silhouette of a person standing above her. The figure knelt down beside her, and Lyra's heart raced. Could it be someone who could help? Or was it yet another threat? For a moment, everything was still, as she thought she might lose consciousness again. But then she felt something gentle on her skin. The figure was touching her, checking for signs of life. She could barely feel the pressure, but it was enough to let her know that this stranger, whoever they were, wasn't here to hurt her. "You're still alive," a voice said softly, its tone low and careful. The voice was unmistakably human. Lyra blinked, trying to focus on the person before her. She was shocked to hear a human voice. She had not expected to meet a human here, on this lifeless planet, especially not in such a situation. The people of her world and humanity had not been allies for many years. Humans were seen as dangerous, unpredictable. They were the last species she ever thought would show kindness to her. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. She didn't know what she was asking for: help, mercy, or maybe just a sign that she wasn't truly alone. The human man paused for a moment, taking in her condition. "You're badly injured," he said, his voice filled with concern. I'll help you, just hold on. Lyra didn't have the strength to argue. She couldn't remember the last time someone had spoken to her like this, with care and compassion. Her people had always been about power, survival, and strength. Emotions like kindness and mercy had no place in their world. But here, in the presence of this stranger, it felt different. She closed her eyes for a moment, allowing herself to trust the human. It was the first time in what felt like forever that she allowed herself to be vulnerable, to admit that she needed help. And as the human carefully lifted her into his arms, Lyra realized that, despite everything she had been through, there was still hope. Someone had come for her, and maybe, just maybe, this human would help her find the strength to rise again. Alex had spent most of his life exploring the far reaches of space. He wasn't a soldier or a hero. He was just a scavenger, a man who made his living by finding things that others had left behind. He wasn't looking for trouble when he came to this barren planet, and he certainly wasn't expecting to find anyone alive. His ship had been drifting through the galaxy for weeks. Supplies were running low, and he was desperate for resources. When he noticed the wreckage of an alien ship from a distance, he saw it as a potential gold mine, a chance to find salvageable equipment or even some food. What he didn't expect was to find a prince's dot. As Alex approached the wreck, he first thought it was just another abandoned vessel, left behind after some intergalactic battle. The damage was severe. Pieces of the ship scattered across the landscape, glowing faintly in the dim light of the planet's twin moons. He had seen wrecks like this before, but something about it made him pause. There was a strange feeling in the air, an unsettling silence that made his skin crawl. He stepped out of his ship and cautiously made his way toward the wreckage, carefully navigating the broken pieces of metal and debris. His boots crunched against the dry ground as he scanned the area. His eyes moved across the twisted wreckage, but nothing seemed out of place until he heard a faint sound. It was a soft, almost inaudible groan, like a voice barely able to speak. Alex froze. His hand instinctively reached for the small weapon at his side, though he knew it was unnecessary. It wasn't an enemy that he was hearing. As his eyes swept across the wreckage, he saw a figure lying motionless among the debris. At first, he thought it was just another lifeless body, but something stopped him. There was something different about this one. A glimmer of light caught the figure's skin, and for a moment, Alex thought he saw a faint pulse of life. He approached cautiously, stepping around the broken pieces of the ship. As he got closer, he could make out the figure more clearly. It was a woman, no, an alien woman. Her skin was pale blue with a hint of purple, her face delicate but battered, and her body weak. Her breathing was shallow, and her eyes fluttered open only briefly before closing again. Alex's heart skipped a beat. He had never seen an alien like this before. His mind raced. What was she doing here? Who was she? He had read stories of alien royalty and powerful leaders, but he never thought he would meet one in person, let alone find one in such a state. She was a princess, that much was clear from her attire, though tattered and torn. It was still regal. Without thinking, Alex knelt beside her, brushing his hand across the dirt and debris that had settled around her. His instincts kicked in. She needed help, and he wasn't about to leave her to die alone on this planet. "Hey," he said gently, his voice calm. "You're safe now." She didn't respond, but he noticed her fingers twitch, a small sign of life. Alex quickly removed his jacket and used it to cover her, doing his best to shield her from the cold of the planet's nights. Then he gathered what supplies he had left from his ship, some water, bandages, and a few medical tools he'd salvaged from past missions. He didn't know much about alien biology, but he could at least stop the bleeding and keep her comfortable, until he figured out what to do next. He moved quickly but carefully, cleaning the wounds on her arms and legs and wrapping them in makeshift bandages. Despite her condition, he marveled at how delicate she looked, her skin soft, her face striking, even in the dim light. She looked like royalty, but she was also just a person lying there helpless, in need of help. As Alex worked, he couldn't help but wonder about her. How had she ended up here? Had she been abandoned, or was she a prisoner of some sort? The thought that someone might have left her for dead stirred something in him, something deeper than curiosity. He had seen a lot of people abandon others in his lifetime, but he wasn't like them. He wouldn't leave her behind. After what felt like hours, he finally finished bandaging her up. He leaned back and took a deep breath, wiping sweat from his brow. She was stable for now, but she still wasn't out of danger. Alex knew he had to get her off this planet, but he had no idea how. His ship was small, and there wasn't enough room for both of them to escape. And even if he could get her back to his ship, where would he go? What would he do with her? The uncertainty of it all gnawed at him. But one thing was certain: he couldn't just leave her here. He had to help her, even if it meant putting himself in danger. His eyes fell on her face once more, and for the first time he saw her eyes flicker open. They were a bright, piercing shade of silver, and they locked onto him for a brief moment before closing again. He knew she was still weak, but her survival instinct was still strong. "Hang on," Alex whispered softly, as though talking to himself. "I'll get you out of here." The alien princess lay in his arms, unconscious but alive. And for the first time in his life, Alex felt something he hadn't in a long time: a sense of responsibility. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about doing what was right, even if he didn't understand the full story. The strange bond between them had already begun, even if neither of them fully realized it yet. Lyra's mind drifted in and out of consciousness as she lay in the human shelter. The pain from her wounds was still there, a constant reminder of the battle she had fought. Her chest ached with every breath, and the weight of exhaustion pressed heavily on her. She had no idea how long she had been unconscious, but when she opened her eyes again, the world was different. She was no longer lying in the wreckage of her ship or on the cold, unforgiving surface of the planet. Instead, she found herself in a small, warm shelter. A small fire crackled nearby, and she could hear the soft rustling of fabric and the occasional sound of footsteps. Confusion clouded her mind as she tried to make sense of her surroundings. Slowly, her eyes focused on the figure sitting beside her. It was the human Alex. She had seen his face before, though she had not yet fully understood why he was here or how he had found her. The way he had cared for her was surprising, but now that she had time to think, she couldn't ignore the reality of the situation. She was alive, and this human had saved her. But what did that mean? Was he just another scavenger looking for a way to profit from her situation? Was he really helping her out of kindness, or was there something else at play? Lyra shifted slightly, her head still spinning from the pain and the disorientation. She tried to sit up, but the effort left her breathless. The pain was sharp, and her body wasn't ready to move. She winced, the reality of her injuries hitting her all at once. "Don't try to move too much." Alex's voice was soft but firm. He was sitting close by, watching her carefully. His eyes held no malice, only concern. "You're still weak. You need rest." Lyra wanted to argue, to tell him she couldn't afford to rest. Her mission was important, and her people needed her. But her body was telling her otherwise. She couldn't fight the exhaustion that had settled into her bones. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It felt strange to speak after so many hours of silence. Alex hesitated for a moment, as if unsure of how to answer. "You're safe. I've been taking care of you?" Lyra narrowed her eyes at him. "Why would you help me?" She still couldn't understand it. She had never trusted humans. Their history with her people was filled with tension, and their encounters had always been filled with hostility. Yet here he was, a human, helping her when others had turned their backs on her. "I wasn't going to leave you to die out there," Alex said quietly, his voice gentle but steady. "I know what it's like to be left behind. I couldn't just walk away." Lyra felt a strange pang in her chest at his words. He was speaking with empathy, something she had not expected from a human. She had always believed that humans were selfish, driven by greed and ambition. But Alex didn't seem like the others. His actions spoke louder than any words, and it made her wonder if she had been wrong about them all along. As she processed his words, her mind began to clear a little. She had been so focused on surviving that she hadn't given much thought to the fact that someone had cared enough to help her. She had been fighting to stay alive, but now, lying in the warmth of this small shelter, she could see that her survival was no longer about just herself. It was about something bigger. The room was quiet for a long time, only the crackling fire breaking the silence. Alex had gone back to working, tending to the fire and making sure she was comfortable. His movements were efficient and calm, showing no sign of panic or uncertainty. He seemed so different from the people she had known, who were always full of plans and strategies. Alex didn't have any grand agenda, it seemed. He just wanted to help her. Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden noise. The sound of something shifting in the distance made her tense. It wasn't the wind. Lyra's instincts kicked in, her body reacting before her mind could catch up. She had been trained for battle, for moments like this when danger could come at any time. "Stay still," Alex said, his voice low but urgent. "I'll check it out." Lyra tried to protest, but Alex was already on his feet, moving toward the entrance of the shelter. She watched him go, her mind racing. What if it was an enemy? What if they had found her already? What if she wasn't safe, even here? She didn't have time to think further. Alex returned moments later, a slight frown on his face. "It's nothing," he said, though there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice. "I'll keep watch, you rest." Lyra was not so easily comforted. She knew danger was always lurking, especially when she was at her weakest, but something in Alex's calmness settled her. He had made it clear that he wasn't afraid, even if she had no idea what he was facing. Perhaps for the first time she wasn't alone. "Thank you," she said. Her voice still weak but sincere. Alex gave her a small, reassuring smile. "You don't have to thank me. I'm just doing what anyone would do." Lyra couldn't believe it. She had never encountered a human like him before. In her world, kindness was a rarity, and it made her feel vulnerable in a way she hadn't expected. She had always been the one in control, the one who protected others. But now, for the first time, she realized she didn't have to face everything alone. The morning came quietly, with the sun rising slowly over the horizon, casting its light across the barren landscape. Lyra woke with a start, her body still, weak but her mind sharper than the day before. She had rested for hours, but the unsettling feeling of danger still lingered in her chest. Something wasn't right. She tried to sit up, wincing as the pain from her injuries reminded her of how vulnerable she still was. Alex, who had been sitting by the fire, glanced over at her and immediately stood up. "Take it easy," he said. Gently, his voice calm and steady. "You've been through a lot." Lyra nodded but didn't respond. She could feel her strength returning, but it wasn't enough yet. She needed to move, to get away from this place. But as her eyes scanned the area outside their shelter, something caught her attention, a flicker of movement on the horizon. Lyra's instincts kicked in. She knew danger when she saw it. "Alex," she said sharply, her voice steady but urgent. "There are people coming. We need to leave now." Alex turned to look outside, his eyes narrowing as he tried to focus on the distant movement. His hand instinctively went to the weapon at his side, though he knew it wasn't much of a match against whatever threat was coming. He had no idea who these people were, but Lyra's warning made it clear that they were no ordinary visitors. "Who are they?" Alex asked, his voice tense. "They're not friendly," Lyra replied, her gaze fixed on the distant figures. "They're the ones who left me behind. My people, my enemies. They'll stop at nothing to capture me." Alex didn't need any more explanation. The seriousness in Lyra's voice made it clear that they were in real danger. He quickly moved to pack their things, grabbing what supplies they had and preparing to leave. Lyra wanted to fight, to stand her ground, but she knew her strength wasn't enough. They had no time to waste. "Are you sure you can walk?" Alex asked, looking at her with concern. Lyra nodded, though she could feel the weakness still in her legs. She had no choice but to push through the pain. "I'll manage." They moved quickly but quietly, careful not to make any noise that might alert the approaching group to their location. Alex led the way, with Lyra close behind. The landscape was rough, the ground uneven, but Alex had experience in navigating such terrain. He wasn't just a scavenger, he was resourceful, and that skill was helping them now more than ever. As they moved, Lyra couldn't help but think back to her mission, to the people who had sent her here. They had promised peace, a chance for her people to finally find stability. But everything had gone wrong. Her ship had been attacked, and she had barely escaped with her life. Now, her enemies were coming for her, and she wasn't sure if she could stop them. "We need to find shelter," Alex said as they reached a small cluster of rocky outcrops. The rocks provided a bit of cover, and it was a good place to hide for the time being. They crouched down, staying low as the enemy approached. Lyra's heart raced as she listened to the sounds of the approaching footsteps. She could hear their voices, rough and menacing as they drew closer. Her people, her enemies, were relentless. They wouldn't stop until they had what they wanted. "Where is she?" one of the voices called out. "She can't have gone far. Search the area." Lyra held her breath, her fingers digging into the rough ground as she fought to stay calm. Alex was beside her, his face set with determination. He wasn't afraid of the enemy, but Lyra could sense his UNE. "Ace?" This wasn't a fight they were prepared for. The voices grew louder, and the figures of several men began to appear on the horizon, moving in their direction. They were scanning the area, but they hadn't seen Alex and Lyra yet. "Alex." "We need a plan," Lyra whispered urgently. Alex thought for a moment, his eyes darting around as he quickly assessed their situation. The enemy wasn't far, but they were still a distance away. If they could move fast enough, they might be able to escape. But that meant they had to get through the rocks without being spotted. "I'll lead them away," Alex said. "You stay hidden and get to cover. I'll draw their attention and you can slip past them." Lyra shook her head. "It's too dangerous. They're looking for me, not you." "I know," Alex said, his voice steady. "But you're not going to survive if we stay here. They'll capture you and then it's all over." Lyra didn't like the plan, but she knew it was their only chance. She had to trust him. She nodded silently and watched as Alex slowly stood up, moving behind a rock and positioning himself so that the enemy would see him. He made a noise, a loud shout to draw their attention, and then quickly ran in the opposite direction. The enemy spotted him immediately, shouting commands to chase after him. They took the bait, and as they ran after Alex, Lyra used the opportunity to slip past the rocks and move deeper into the wilderness. She was faster than she had felt in days, her heart pounding in her chest. Every step felt like a race against time, a race for her life. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she couldn't stop. If she stopped, they would catch her. And if they caught her, everything she had fought for would be lost. Alex's voice echoed in the distance as he led them farther away. "Hurry!" he shouted, his voice strained but determined. Lyra's breath came in short bursts as she ran through the dense underbrush. Her legs were beginning to ache, and the pain from her wounds flared up with every movement. But she pushed on, knowing that she couldn't afford to stop. The enemy soldiers were still chasing her, their footsteps echoing in the distance. She didn't know how much longer she could keep this up, but she refused to be caught. Alex's voice had been her lifeline, a steady reassurance that he was still leading them away from danger, but she had no idea where he was now. She had lost sight of him when they had split up, and the only thing she could focus on was running. The further she got from the enemy, the safer she would be, but the wilderness was vast, and there was no guarantee that she wouldn't run into more threats. Her heart raced, her chest tight with fear, but she kept moving. She had to trust that Alex would be all right, that he could handle himself. He had proven to be resourceful, even when she had doubted him. But her mind still couldn't shake the thought of him being out there, alone, trying to keep the enemy at bay. She pushed those thoughts aside and focused on her surroundings. The landscape was unfamiliar, but her training had prepared her for this. Her people had taught her to survive in harsh environments, to adapt to any situation. She just had to keep moving, to stay one step ahead. As she continued through the thick forest, the sound of footsteps slowly faded. She had put enough distance between herself and the soldiers that they were no longer close. Her muscles ached with exhaustion, but she allowed herself a brief moment of relief. She couldn't stop yet, though. She needed to find shelter somewhere to rest and somewhere to regroup. After what felt like hours, Lyra stumbled upon a small clearing. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow across the trees and the thick grass. She paused, taking a moment to catch her breath. She was exhausted, but she couldn't afford to rest for too long. She needed to keep moving, keep hiding. But she had been running for so long, and the fatigue was starting to take its toll. Then, she heard something, a rustle in the bush behind her. Her body tensed, and she instinctively reached for the weapon at her side. She hadn't heard the enemy approach, but there was no telling who or what was behind her before she could turn around. A figure stepped into the clearing. Lyra's hand went to her weapon, but the figure quickly raised a hand, signaling for her to stay calm. "It's just me," Alex's voice came softly, his presence a relief that she hadn't expected. "I lost them. We're safe at least. For now." Lyra lowered her weapon, though her heart was still racing. She hadn't expected him to find her so quickly. She had thought he would be busy drawing the enemy away for much longer. But here he was, standing in front of her, unharmed and still determined to help her. "How did you?" Lyra began, her voice weak from exhaustion. "Don't worry about it," Alex interrupted, his tone gentle. "We don't have much time. We need to keep moving." Lyra nodded, grateful but still cautious. She didn't know how he had managed to escape the enemy's pursuit, but for now, she trusted him. They had to stick together if they were going to survive. Alex scanned the area around them, his eyes sharp. "We need to get to higher ground. It'll give us a better view and more time to react if anyone comes looking for us." Lyra agreed, even though she was tired. She knew the importance of staying ahead of the enemy, of never letting them get too close. Together they moved through the forest, staying in the shadows and avoiding the open areas where they might be spotted. The journey was difficult. Every step felt like it took more effort than the last, but they pressed on. After a while, they reached a rocky outcrop that provided a good vantage point of the surrounding area. From here, they could see the enemy troops searching below, still. "Looking for any sign of their presence. We'll wait here for now," Alex said, his voice calm but alert. "We can't stay in one place for too long, but this will give us a chance to rest and plan our next move." Lyra nodded again, grateful for the brief respite. She sat down on a rock, carefully checking her wounds as she did so. The pain was still there, but it wasn't as sharp as before. She was getting stronger. She had to. "We'll figure this out," she muttered, more to herself than to Alex. "We have to." Alex sat beside her, looking out over the land. "We will. You're not alone in this anymore." His words were simple, but they carried weight. Lyra had always been used to standing alone. She was a princess, a leader, someone who had always carried the burden of responsibility. But with Alex by her side, she realized that maybe she didn't have to carry that burden alone anymore. For the first time since the crash, Lyra allowed herself to relax, just a little. She let her guard down, if only for a moment. She had found an unexpected ally in this human, someone who was willing to risk everything to help her. That thought filled her with both gratitude and a growing sense of hope. As the night fell, and the stars began to appear in the sky, Lyra knew that the journey ahead would be difficult. But for the first time, she felt that it was possible. With Alex by her side, maybe they could fight back. Maybe they could win. The night passed quietly, and the air grew colder as dawn broke across the horizon. Lyra and Alex had barely slept, their minds filled with the dangers that still loomed around them. The enemy was out there, and while they had managed to escape for now, they knew it was only a matter of time before the search would resume. Alex had built a small fire to keep them warm. Though they were careful not to make too much noise, they had to keep their presence hidden. After all, they were on enemy territory now. Lyra sat with her arms wrapped around her knees, her eyes lost in thought. The events of the past few days had left her feeling drained, both physically and emotionally. She had been abandoned, left to die by her own people, and now she was fighting for her survival with the help of a human she barely knew. It was hard to accept, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized that Alex had become her lifeline. "We can't stay here," Lyra said finally, her voice low but firm. "The enemy will come searching for us again. We need to leave this area before they realize we're still alive." Alex nodded, his face thoughtful. "I agree, but where do we go?" "We can't keep running forever," Lyra knew the answer. "There. was only one place where they might have a chance to survive, to turn the tables on her enemies. It was risky, but it was their best shot. There's a hidden base not far from here, she explained. It belongs to an old faction of my people, those who don't agree with the current leadership. They'll help us. But we'll have to be careful. The enemy doesn't know about it, and if we're caught near it, they'll know we've been there. Alex listened carefully, taking in her words. So, you're telling me we're going to trust these people? They're our only option, Lyra said. They may not like me, but they'll help us, especially against the enemy. We just have to make it there without being seen. Alex thought for a moment, then nodded. All right. But we need a plan. We can't just walk right into their base. We'll need to be smart. Lyra agreed. The journey to the hidden base would take them through treacherous terrain, and the enemy would likely be hunting them the whole way. The plan had to be perfect. They couldn't afford to make any mistakes. First, we need to throw them off. Our trail, Lyra said. If they think we're headed in one direction, we can take another. We'll use the forest to cover our movements, but we'll have to move quickly. Alex nodded, already thinking of the best way to carry out the plan. We'll need supplies. We can't go without food or water for too long. I have some stored supplies, Lyra said, but it won't last us long. We'll need to find more along the way. The two of them packed up their things quietly, making sure everything was ready. Lyra's injuries were still painful, but they were starting to heal. The bandages Alex had applied were doing their job, and though she felt weak, she knew she couldn't afford to waste any more time. We'll travel at night, Alex suggested. That way we'll have cover. During the day, we can rest in the forest and hide. It'll give us the best chance of staying out of sight. Lyra agreed with his plan. The cover of night would help them move undetected, and during the day they could find places to hide and recover. It was risky, but it was the only way forward. Do you know how to find the base? Alex asked. Lyra nodded. I do, but it's not easy to get to. The forest can be confusing, and there are traps set up by the faction to keep outsiders away. We'll have to be careful, but if we stick together, we can make it. Alex smiled slightly. I trust you, let's do this. They spent the rest of the day preparing for the journey ahead. As the sun set, they gathered what little they had and set out under the cover of darkness. The air was cold, but they kept moving, using the shadows to hide their movements. Lyra led the way, her senses sharp despite her tiredness. She knew the terrain well, even though it had been a long time since she had been in this part of the forest. The trees were tall, their thick branches blocking most of the moonlight, and the ground was uneven, filled with rocks and fallen branches. Every step had to be careful. They walked for hours, staying quiet and alert. The only sounds were the occasional rustle of leaves and the distant call of animals in the forest. As they traveled, Lyra kept her mind focused on the task ahead. She couldn't let herself think about the enemy or the danger that still surrounded them. She had to keep moving, keep going forward. As the night wore on, they reached the edge of the forest, where the trees began to thin out. Ahead of them lay a wide-open plain, stretching out beneath the stars. It was the perfect place to rest, but they couldn't afford to stop for long. Lyra glanced at Alex, who was still beside her, his face serious but determined. We need to cross the plain, Lyra said, but we have to do it quickly. The enemy will be close behind us. Alex nodded. We'll make it. They pushed forward, crossing the open land as fast as they could. The plain was silent, but the tension was thick in the air. Every sound seemed louder than it should be. Every shadow seemed to move in the corners of their eyes. Just as they reached the far side of the plain, Lyra heard something. A faint sound, barely audible, but unmistakable. The enemy was near. They had to hurry. We're almost there, Lyra said, urgency in her voice. Keep moving. They pushed forward, running now, the sound of their footsteps the only thing that filled the night. The hidden base was just ahead, but they weren't there yet. They had to make it to safety, and they had to do it quickly. The hidden base was just ahead, the faint outline of the structure barely visible in the night. Lyra and Alex were exhausted, but they didn't stop. They could hear the sounds of the enemy behind them, growing louder. Every step felt like a race against time, a race for survival. The open plain had been a dangerous crossing, but they had made it through. Now they just had to reach the base and hope that they could find shelter and allies there. Lyra led the way, her sharp eyes scanning the area for any signs of danger. The forest was dense, but she knew it well. The path to the hidden base was a winding one, designed to keep outsiders from finding it. But they had to hurry. The enemy would not be far behind. "Stay close," Lyra said, her voice low but firm. "We're almost there." Alex nodded, his breathing steady but loud in the silence. He could feel the weight of their situation. Every step they took felt like it could be their last. But there was no turning back now. He trusted Lyra, and he trusted her plan. They had made it this far. They couldn't stop now. As they moved deeper into the forest, the sounds of the enemy grew faint. But Lyra's instincts told her they were still close. She glanced over at Alex, who was keeping pace with her. His expression was determined, but she could see the exhaustion in his eyes. He had been through as much as she had. He had fought to protect her, and now it was time for them to find safety. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the base. It was hidden among the trees, nearly invisible to anyone who didn't know where to look. The walls were covered with vines and moss, blending in perfectly with the surrounding forest. The entrance was a small door built into the side of a large stone structure, barely visible in the darkness. Lyra approached the door and pressed her hand against a small panel beside it. The door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a dimly lit interior. The air inside was cool, and the smell of old stone and earth filled her nose. It felt like a place of refuge, a place where she could finally rest. But she knew they couldn't let their guard down yet. "Come on," Lyra said quietly, ushering Alex inside. "We're safe for now." Alex stepped inside, looking around cautiously. The interior was simple but functional. There were crates and boxes stacked against the walls, along with makeshift beds and chairs. It was clear that the people who had built this place had been living in hiding for a long time. Lyra moved to a corner of the room, where a small table was set up with maps and supplies. She began to examine the maps, looking for any signs of where her enemies might be. She had to be prepared for anything. The last thing they needed was for the enemy to find this place. "We can rest here for a while," Lyra said, glancing over at Alex, "but we need to figure out our next move. The enemy won't stop coming for me, and I'm not going to let them destroy everything my people have worked for." Alex walked over to her, his expression serious. "I get it. You've got a mission, and I'm here to help you with it. But we need to take this one step at a time. Right now, we're safe, but tomorrow we'll need to figure out how to get you back to your people." Lyra looked up at him, her eyes filled with determination. "I'll do whatever it takes. But I can't do it alone. I need allies. And I need to make sure my people know what's really happening." "I can't let the lies continue," Alex nodded. "We'll get you the help you need. You're not alone anymore." For a moment, there was silence between them. Lyra had been alone for so long, surrounded by enemies, betrayed by her own people, abandoned by those she thought she could trust. But now, for the first time, she felt like she wasn't fighting this battle alone. Alex had become more than just an ally. He had become her friend, someone she could trust when the world felt like it was against her. She let out a breath, allowing herself a brief moment of relief. They had made it through the night, and now they had a chance to fight back. The base was a safe place for now, and they could regroup, but tomorrow would bring more challenges. They would have to plan their next move carefully. "We'll need to contact the faction here," Lyra said after a moment. "They may not trust me, but they'll trust the cause. We have to show them that we can fight back, that we have the strength to take on the enemy." Alex looked at her, his expression resolute. "I'm with you, whatever it takes." Lyra smiled faintly. She knew the road ahead would be long and difficult, but for the first time since her ship crashed, she felt like they had a chance. She had allies now, someone who cared about her and her cause. And with Alex by her side, she was ready to face whatever came next. The enemy may have thought they could defeat her, but they were wrong. She wasn't alone anymore. Together, Lyra and Alex would fight for the future of her people. And this time, they would not be stopped. As the night settled around the base, the quiet of the forest seemed to offer a moment of peace. It wouldn't last long, but for now, it was enough. They had made it this far, and they would continue, moving forward step by step until they could defeat the enemy and bring the peace that was so desperately needed.